Hello, hi teachers. This is the instruction guide for for primary three, term 3, week 7. This week there are 3 booklets, all fractions related. We've decided to move to fractions first before going back to some of the earlier topics. For the first booklet, it will be on equivalent fractions. So to start things right, okay, make sure that the correct phrasing or the correct wording is used accordingly. Here, students need to know there's numerator and denominator. Denominator refers to the total number of parts of one whole. Okay, and numerator would usually be the selected parts, right, or the shaded part. So when we say that, if we look at this picture here, okay, it will be 3 out of 5 parts. 3 out of 5 equal parts are colored, right? Remember not to let students just go with the idea of 3 over parts. That's the wrong way of doing it, all right? So make sure it is 3 out of, so that the understanding of fractions can be reinforced. And when we talk about equivalent fractions, get them to think about if you have several wholes, right? Or for example, cakes of the same size, but they are cut into different number of parts. Okay, the selected ones, okay, you can see that equivalent fractions can be seen here. So if it's if it's 1 out of 2 parts, you cut the cake 1 out of 2 parts, and then versus cutting, it into 2 out of 4 parts, versus cutting it into 3 out of 6 parts, right? They are the same, right? So visually, they can tell that it is the same. The same can be done on the bar, right? Same concept here, right? You can see that they are the same as long as the size of the hole is the same. Okay, then you may have equivalent fractions here, right? Because at the end of the day, for example, 1 out of 3, 2 out of 6, right, is the same size being cut. So it doesn't matter how many pieces you've cut there, because it is proportionate in that sense. Then you have to show them, if you just process it, by numbers, how do you find that they're equal parts? So here, think about 1/3. Okay, we multiply the numerator by 2, for example, then you multiply the denominator by 2, right? You always have to do the same. What you do to the top, you must do to the bottom. You get 2 out of 6, which is why it's equal parts. Okay, so same thing as here. All right. What about simplifying, right? Let's say that if the numerator is and denominator seems like a larger number, then students should need to simplify it as best as they can. Typically, for all the questions, even without the question asking students to simplify, they have to do it. So in the case of 4 out of 12, how can you simplify it, right? 4 divided by 2, 12 divided by 2, right? Some kids will be able to do 4 divided by 1, and then 4 divided by 4, and then 12 divided by 4, right? And you get 1/3 as well. Okay, so that's the simplest form. The simplest form is when you cannot divide further. You can also use fractions on the number line. So if you look at the number line here, 1 whole here is equal. The lines are then cut into different parts. Okay, so you can make comparison here. So in this case, 2 out of 4 is the same as 4 out of 8. 3 out of 4 is the same as 6 out of 8. Okay. All right, and then just get them to do a bit of guided practice, right? Get them to do all. And once they have completed all the guided practice, if there are no further questions, I think they are all set to move on to the next booklets, right? Because the rest are quite straightforward in that sense. Okay. The only ones that I think they might still have some challenges, I think the multiplication part is easy, but perhaps get them to do, for example, question 3, the simplest form of each fraction, right, in which they have to divide, right? So get them to write out the actual working, right? 3 divided by 3 equals 1, 9 divided by 3 equals 3. Okay, get them to draw something like this when you see here, okay? All right, and can test a few more questions. All right, here, simplest form, simplifying. And after that, I think perhaps as what we usually do, right? Skip them to the let's skip to the last question here. Not last questions, some of the last questions. For example, page 17, question I, right? Is this the simplest form? Okay, so they have to decide. Okay, I will always ask students to, if there's odd number on top and it's odd number below, then you got to divide by an odd number to see how far they can go. Okay. All right. Or how what's the smallest and go in that sense. If it is if the numerator is an even number and denominator is an even number, all right, then if they are not very familiar with multiplication, you should always try dividing by 2 first. Okay, that should get them somewhere. All right. And then we move on. Let's see. Okay, I think will be good to get them to do question 21, right? To get them to think about why is it that 1 out of 4, okay, is a cake of 1 out of 4 equivalent to 2 out of 8, right? In this sense, because it is not, because the whole is different, right? The size is different. All right, then move on to number 2. Booklet number 2. This is about comparing fractions, which is greater. Okay, so here you can do it, in terms of visually, you can actually show them. It's quite clear. 3 out of 4 parts is greater than 3 out of 5 parts. All right. Now here, teachers usually would tell them that if, let's say, the numerator is the same, okay, then the denominator, the greater the denominator, the smaller the fraction is. Or the smaller the denominator, the greater the fraction is. Some students may have a problem understanding this, right? So you can actually show them, right? Think about a chocolate bar, okay, or a pizza. Okay, I always do that, right? If I cut the pizza into one of the pizzas, I cut into 6, and the other pizza I cut into 3, right? Then you ask the student, would you, if you want to eat more, would you prefer 1 out of 6 slices or 1 out of 3 slices? Then you'll be able to get the idea. Oh yeah, because for the whole pizza, right, when you cut into smaller number of slices, each slice is bigger. Okay, so that's how we can explain to them, right? You can actually draw a circle, right, and show them that instead. Then we do comparison. How do we compare equivalent fractions? Okay, how do we do equivalent fractions? Here we have which fraction is smaller, and 2 out of 3 or 5 out of 6. Okay, so a few ways to do it. Okay, one is to, first of all, you want to make sure that they have the same, if you want to compare them, then make sure that they have the same common denominator. All right, so that means that you have to convert 2 out of 3, you need to make sure that there's a denominator of 6. How do you turn 3 to 6? You multiply by 2, and when you multiply by 2, below you got to multiply by 2 on top. Then you have 2 out of 3 equals 4 out of 6. And then you can compare easily, right? 5 out of 6 is greater in that sense. 4 out of 6 is smaller. Okay. Okay, let's move on. Sorry about the interjection just now. Okay, so we're talking about comparison. All right, so this will require some practice. Get them to do a few practices here. Okay, how to do comparison. Again, remind them, if let's say the numerator is the same, then for denominator, you just look at which is smaller. The smaller it is, the greater it is. All right, remind them about the pizza. Okay, the smaller number of slices that you cut pizza into, each slice is actually greater. The size is larger, right, or bigger. Okay, so for some of this question, they have to do the conversion, right? Like 3 out of 4. How do you make it into 3 out of 4 and 5 out of 6? You can't make 4 into 6, right? You can't make 6 into 4. So you have to find the next common multiple, the smallest common multiple of 4 and 6. Okay, actually not quite the same, right? Because when you say common multiple, then it could be yeah, common multiple actually, yeah, let's use this term, common multiple, then it'd be 12, right? The smallest common multiple of 4 and 6 is 12. So you have to do it separately, convert it separately, and then get them to do a few practices here. Okay, greater than and smaller than. Right here, it's about filling in. So the question, they have to write smaller than or greater than. Okay, some of these may be a bit more challenging than others. All right, like for example, 4 and 5, how do you do that? Okay, so if they are unable to make the denominator the same, all right, then they can make the numerator the same. All right, so good for them to do question D here. Question D on page 15. All right, 5 and 4. Okay, if you want to make them into next common denominator, next common multiple of 4 and 5, that would be 20. It's quite huge. So what you can do is you can convert the numerator, make the numerator in the same in state. So in this case, it will be 12. All right. Okay. Yeah, and then just get them to do some of these practices. Okay, so like this here, which is smaller, 6 out of 11 or 1 out of 2 on page 20. Okay, so the way to do this is, right, few ways, right? One is if the student is very familiar with the idea of half fractions. Okay, so 1 out of 2 is actually 6 out of 12, right? And then using the concept of numerator being the same, right? Then denominator larger it is, okay, the smaller it is. Okay, or they can just convert it into 1 out of 2, into 6 out of 12. Okay, so using some different concepts here. All right. Okay. Now, I have a special technique which I got it from. So I cannot remember where I got it from sometime now. But once they are familiar with this method, right, you can teach them a faster method. Although this faster method, right, I wouldn't recommend that you teach the student until they understand the concept of fractions very well. Okay. So what is this method? Let me show you. Put it on the whiteboard. Just give me a minute. So for example, 3 out of 4, right? And 4 out of 5, which is greater? Okay. So what I do is I call this the X-Men method. Sorry, beg your pardon for coming up with a very lame name. But can you see an X here? All right, get them to draw X like that. And then for each of those lines here, you get them to multiply. 3 times 5 equals 15. Okay, 4 times 4 equals 16. So which is greater, 16 or 15? 16, right? So that means 4 out of 5 is greater. Okay, so this is a fast method. It doesn't really show a lot of, I mean, when students do that, they may not be able to show a lot of understanding. So please only teach them this when they understand how to do the traditional kind of way of comparison. Okay, do not show them this until they have learned what they are supposed to write in the booklets early on. Okay, all right, let's move on to book number 3. All right, so for book number 3, it is actually quite straightforward because it is about ordering. So once they have learned how to compare, they then now do the ordering. All right, ordering of fractions. Okay, so most of the questions are the same, right? Arrange 3 out of 5, 1, 3 out of 7 in order, begin with the smallest. Okay, so what they can do is they can first compare 3, 5, and 3, 7. Okay, and then after that, they can use convert 1/3, right, to 3 out of 5 and 3 out of 7. Okay, how to compare 1 out of 3 with 3 out of 5 and 3 out of 7? Okay, you can actually convert the 1 into numerator of 3. Okay, so that you can do the comparison. So really it's for practice, and then knowing what's the best way to do it. Okay, after that, they can do guided practice. Okay, once they're very familiar, they can also use the method that I've taught them. All right, the special method early on. Okay, all right. Now let's see. So get them to do the guided practice, and then after that, I think one of the questions that you need to get them to do, okay, would be let's see, using half as a benchmark, right, to compare fractions. So page 17, number 14. Okay, how to use half as a benchmark, right? Let's think about it. Okay, which fraction is greater than half, or which fraction is smaller than half? All right, so they should be able to find that actually 5 out of 12, right, is smaller than half. Okay, because total 12 parts is less than 6 parts. So that means but if you look at 4 out of 5 and 7 out of 10, right, the rest are greater. So 5 out of 12 is definitely smaller. So then you just need to compare 4 out of 5 and 7 out of 10, right, to get the answer. Okay, all right, that's it for this week's topic. Should be relatively easy, especially for students. They have done fractions in P2. All right, some of them are already doing it in school, so I think there shouldn't be any problem. Okay, that's all for this week's instructional guide.